Well. I don't know what that terrifying music was playing right before this, but hope you're not stressing too hard about that because today we're going to talk about some football. Welcome back to the Onside Kick Show. I'm your host, Zach Stein, and today we got some really good things to talk about. Today we'll do our trivia like always, talk about some of the latest headlines, of course, do our player flashback, weekly pick'ems, and I'll answer your questions at the end of today. So thank you guys for joining me here. This will be our last live episode for the year. So I will most likely still record episodes from home and publish them to the YouTube channel. But this will be the last one live on KRUI FM for 2023. So for those of you guys in school, happy finals week. You guys got this. Make it happen. And after that, you got a whole month of just sitting back, watching some football, watching some basketball, hanging out. So you can do it one more week. And for those of you not in school, well, I envy you. So let's go ahead and get started today. As always, we will begin with our trivia, powered by fantasyindex.com, where cheaters always prosper. And the question for today, December 8th, 2023, only two undrafted wide receivers in NFL history have gone on to catch 800 career passes. What is the only team that both of these receivers played for? Well, two undrafted wide receivers in NFL history that have gone to catch over 800 career passes. I believe one of them is, I think, is Derek Mason. I believe he was undrafted. I'm not totally sure. I feel like I remember that being a fact about him because he was one of those guys that kind of reached his prime after he was 27. He played well into his 30s. I just don't know if he was undrafted. I'm trying to find some other legendary undrafted receivers. I don't know if Keenan McCardell was drafted. That was in the 90s, so back then, I mean, there would have been like probably 14 rounds of the NFL draft. So, man, this is a difficult one. 800 career passes too. That's a lot. You got to have 8 seasons with 100 catches. And if you play longer than that, man. Okay, so most likely Hall of Famers. It's got to be, and the only team that both of these receivers played for. Whew, man, I mean, you think of teams like the Vikings. They've had a ton of really good wide receivers in their day. I don't actually know No, Chris Carter, actually. I think he was... Am I correct? Was he a number 1 overall pick? No. Can't be. I'm thinking of someone. Keyshawn Johnson was a number 1 overall pick. Man, undrafted wide receivers. I'm going to pull up a list of teams here so I can get some juices flowing. Gavin and I, which sadly Gavin could not join us on the show today, but Gavin and I spent way too much time in the trivia last week, so definitely going to keep it short. But I'm thinking, Dolphins, Bills, Jets, Patriots, Ravens. I'm trying to think of teams with 2 Hall of Fame wide receivers that I know that I can't remember when they were drafted. Browns, Steelers, Bengals, Chiefs, Broncos, Chargers. Raiders, Jaguars. Man, yeah, undrafted is really bugging me here. Texans, Colts, Titans, 49ers, Eagles, Cowboys, Giants, Commanders, Rams. I don't know why the Rams is calling to me right now. I don't know if that's correct. Seahawks. I mean, maybe Steve Largent. Was he undrafted? I really don't know. It's so hard to guess who was undrafted before the 2000s because there were way more rounds of the NFL draft. It wasn't just 7. Falcons, Bucks, Saints, Panthers. Man, this is a really tough question. I know. You know what? I know for a fact. I don't believe Marcus Colston was drafted. Saints legend. I'm pretty sure he was not drafted. If he was, it was like in the 6th or the 7th. But I'm very sure he. Maybe I'm not sure if he's undrafted. Man, Panthers maybe. I'm realizing how little I know about when legendary wide receivers were drafted, like Steve Smith. I'm trying to think. I'm not sure. Man, you know what? I don't know if I'm gonna get this one. Unfortunately, I honestly, this is gonna stump me. The Rams for some reason was calling to me, so I'm just gonna pick the Rams. I mean, I don't know when Isaac Bruce or Torrey Holt were drafted. I highly doubt those two are the guys that were undrafted, but. We'll just send it. We'll say the Rams. Man, rough trivia question for today. The answer was the Denver Broncos. Okay, so Wes Welker with 903 career receptions. Yeah, Wes Welker, definitely undrafted. That's just, Patriot player. I should have guessed really the Patriots. They bring in all those undrafted guys and have a lot of success there. And then Rod Smith was the other guy, 849 catches. I know Rod Smith. Broncos legend, one of the best receivers of all time for the Broncos, but I did not realize he was undrafted. And then, fun fact in here, all-time leader for most receptions by an undrafted player is tight end Antonio Gates. So there you go. Well, brutally failed that one today, and I should have listened to Fantasy Index and cheated, but alas. So let's go ahead and jump into some headlines today. We have got a lot of interesting matchups from last week to talk about. The slate was pretty awful, not gonna lie. Chargers Patriots 6-0. Like I thought that was gonna be a 30-14 game or something. Yeah, not even close. Some games that did end up being way better than anticipated. So Falcons Jets was pretty rough. Beyond that, a lot of upsets this week too. So one of the first things I want to talk about is how about them Bengals? Man, going into Jacksonville on Monday night, Jake Browning versus Trevor Lawrence. Jaguars are nearly fully healthy going into that game, that is. They're 8-3, tied for the best seed in the AFC or the second best seed in the AFC. And the Bengals, not out of it just yet. 5-6, they were 0-4 in the division. Come into Jacksonville, get a tough, gritty win. Bengals defense has been really solid all year. Unfortunately, they didn't really play to their best against that tough Jags offense. But Christian Kirk went down early. Trevor Lawrence kept them in the game until he got hurt. We saw some Iowa legend C.J. Beathard action, who honestly should have gone down and won, or at least got some points up for them at the end there. He had that big throw to Calvin Ridley that was called back due to honestly a pretty BS holding call. But yeah, who day? The Bengals still in the race, maybe not for the division. Theoretically, they're only 3 wins behind if some crazy thing happens with the Ravens. They are only 1 game behind the Steelers and the Browns in wins. However, since they have no division wins and every other team in their division has 3 wins, it's going to be tough for them to make the playoffs. But still showing some fight. I think that goes to show you, well, one, Jake Browning is the GOAT. We're going to talk about that in a second. But also Zach Taylor, a guy who came in, had 6 wins in his first 2 seasons, got Joe Burrow and was heralded as this offensive genius just a year after he was looking like one of the worst coaching hires. I think that just goes to show you patience, right? So we've talked about the Panthers and how they have not had a head coach for more than, I think, 2 years because they had Steve Wilkes for a year. They had Matt Rule for, I believe, 2, and then Frank Reich for 1. Maybe Matt Rule was there for 3. But either way, patience. You got to get the assets, obviously. And now, even without Joe Burrow, Jake Browning, speaking of undrafted guys, undrafted out of Washington, looking like a really solid backup. If he can play like he did in Jacksonville, again, against a tough Jacksonville defense, if he can play like that every week, Bengals might need to trade Burrow. I'm kidding. That's not going to happen. But he could be an elite backup in this league, and you never know. There are always some sketchy QB contracts that are handed out. You had the Broncos sign Case Keenum to be their starter. So if for some reason Jake Browning has this crazy tear towards the end of the season. Who knows? He may be starting for a team next year. Maybe a homecoming to the Minnesota Vikings, perhaps, where he was undrafted to. That would be fun to see them give him a big contract and then watch the Bears destroy him. But who am I to say where Jake Browning is going to go, or if this is a fluke game for him? I don't know. But either way, shout out Jake. Was actually a Heisman candidate in 2016. 6th in Heisman voting for Washington. He threw for 3,400 yards, so in 14 games, threw for 3,400 yards on 62% completion with 43 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. And, I mean, that is just awesome. They went 12-2 that year, 8-1 in the conference, and they were 4th in the final AP poll. So Jake Browning, what a guy. Got some momentum for that Bengals team now. They're going to look to reciprocate that this week when they take on a tough Colts team at home. So good for the Bengals there. Let's talk about Burrow a little bit more and the rest of the QBs that were injured this year. Man, it has been a graveyard. This is probably the worst year. No, not probably. This is without a doubt the worst year of quarterback injuries I've ever witnessed in my lifetime. And honestly, maybe for anybody all time. I mean, because you have Joe Burrow went out on November 16th, almost a month ago, went out for the season. Kirk Cousins as well, out for the season, torn Achilles. Daniel Jones, torn ACL after battling those neck injuries. Anthony Richardson, the AC joint sprain. Reminds you of the Cam Newton injury, which kind of screwed up his career. So gotta wish Anthony Richardson a safe and healthy recovery there. Obviously, you had Aaron Rodgers, first play, like second play of the game, snapped his Achilles, and may attempt to come back. We'll get to that in a second. You had Deshaun Watson getting injured as well. And now Trevor Lawrence. I mean, this has been a brutal year. Justin Fields was out for a while. Derek Carr was banged up. I mean, he kind of is every year. But there has been so many injuries. And if you look through these, right, if you're looking at the cause of these injuries, right, you got Cousins, Achilles, Rodgers, Achilles, Daniel Jones, ACL. A lot of these non-contact injuries. And it's just really unfortunate to see because the NFLPA, the Players Association, has been very vocal how about 80% of their players would prefer to play on a grass field rather than turf field. You got a notable NFL wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, who's a big fan of turf. He says that allows him to showcase his speed a little bit better, which is one thing. But for the rest of NFL players, I mean, it is tough. The turf doesn't bounce as much, and because of that, I mean, the non-contact injuries are so common. We've seen that over the last couple of years. And so a lot of teams are calling for turf fields. It's going to be really interesting to see if the NFL abides by that because a lot of NFL stadiums might be hosting some soccer games for the World Cup, I believe, or North American tour. There's going to be a lot of soccer games. So for that, they will probably want to play on grass, and maybe the stadiums will abide and keep the grass for the NFL season. But either way, something has to change. I'm in favor of making them grass fields because, yeah, I mean, especially linemen too. Really any position that even if you shuffle your feet a little bit on the D line, Jalen Phillips, promising defensive end for the Dolphins, right off his get up from the line of scrimmage, boom, Achilles snapped. And so it's just really unfortunate to see. It's been a rough year for quarterbacks, especially, and something definitely needs to be done about it. Now, speaking of injured quarterbacks, so Aaron Rodgers, right, was aiming to return this season. Right now, the Jets are sitting at 4-8. I highly doubt he'll come back. Only reason he would is because he's Aaron Rodgers and he's better than you, so he can do what he wants. He just to show that he did it. I would not put that past him. But at the same time, why risk it, right? You've already announced your return, so I think that's already crazy enough for people to be like, wow, he actually could play if the Jets are in the playoffs, right? But he was on the Pat McAfee show the other day, and he was talking about Zach Wilson and kind of the vibe of the team right now. And one of the things that he brought up, that was brought up to him was There was a report earlier this week saying that Robert Saleh and the Jets were looking to give Zach Wilson the starting job back, and he declined. And Wilson allegedly declined, which, at the time, it's like, all right, good for him. They benched you for Tim Boyle. That is not an NFL quarterback. He's already off the roster. I mean, I don't know how if they were going to bench anybody and let Trevor Siemian play, honestly. This is why you re-signed Mike White. Now he's on the Dolphins, and he got to take that winning knee against that former team when they beat him a week or two ago. But, yeah, that rumor was debunked, obviously, when Robert Saleh said, well, if that was the case, he wouldn't be here. He wouldn't be on our team. In furtherance of that idea, Zach Wilson was named the starting quarterback this week, coming up against the Texans. Sitting at 4-8, what do you have to lose? Tim Boyle is clearly not going to give you a better chance to win. Does Zach Wilson? Honestly, at this point, probably yes. But really, you just want to see what you got out of your young quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is a huge fan of Zach Wilson. They have a great relationship. You can see on the sideline, they're chuckling to each other. Maybe they're talking about how the organization is so poorly ran. Not too sure, but Zach Wilson, again, he was a number 2 pick for a reason. He showcased so much talent at BYU. Personal opinion, I think there was a lot of raw talent that went unpolished. I think Justin Fields probably could have gone ahead of him in that draft. However, he was taken highly for a reason. The Jets messed up the Sam Darnold experiment, who had some success in Carolina and has yet to see any action for the 49ers, but would probably work well in that Shanahan system. So with Zach Wilson, maybe he just needs a fresh start. Regardless, he is back this week. That is going to be a very interesting story to watch as they take on the playoff aspiring Texans, sitting at 7-5, coming in to New York to try and take them down. So before we get into some more headlights today, we're going to take a quick break. Or not. The board is not quite working there. So we're back. We're back already. So more headlines. What is going on with the Patriots, man? What is going on? They beat the Steelers, had an insane first half, 21 points, didn't put up any points in the second half. But the carousel of Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, neither of those guys looked really good. And then you get one of the best Steelers defense, or one of the best defenses in the NFL with the Steelers. Bailey Zappi comes in and throws for 3 touchdowns and an interception and 250 yards. And you're like, okay, well, where was this all season? They get a win, and thank you, Patriots. This was the game to win because now the Bears are safely locked into that top 2 pick unless the Panthers just go on a crazy tear. But, yeah, that was such an interesting game to watch. The defense was clamping in the first half. The offense was firing on all cylinders. Second half seemed like they got nothing going at all, whereas the Pittsburgh defense was totally choking in the first half. Second half, they tightened up. Really, after the 7 minutes in the second quarter, Pittsburgh defense was tightening up. But the Patriots, in my opinion, do not have a very hard decision to make. You've seen some flashes out of both Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. Mac Jones had a pretty good rookie year, all things considered. And frankly, I'm not totally out on him, definitely for the Patriots, but I'm not totally out on Mac Jones as quarterback. You could always see, with the Ryan Tannehill story, you really never know when the prime of a quarterback is done. Same with like Carson Palmer. If you have a good coach and good team and just you let the player develop a little bit more, get some more experience, you really never know what can happen. So I think it's always unfair to call a quarterback's career done after their tenure with their first team, because that's such a controlled environment with the same coaching and player personnel, and there's so many factors that could contribute to how that player is playing. So that being said, I think Mac Jones has been pretty terrible this year. Needs a fresh start. Patriots got to move on from him. There's no way he can be the starting quarterback next year unless you go out there and trade for 2 all-pro wide receivers and get a stud offensive line, which just is not going to happen. And then you got Bailey Zappi, 4th or 5th rounder. Not the guy either. He's not. Okay pocket presence, not a great arm, makes some really questionable decisions. I mean, Mac Jones makes some questionable decisions and over and underthrows some players sometimes, but Bailey Zappi, I mean, some of those touchdowns or some of the throws that he made in that game last night was very sketchy, very tight windows. You had that touchdown to Hunter Henry. The second one was a great grab. That ball is not supposed to be completed. The DB was probably half a centimeter away from getting his finger on that ball, and that is just a throw that you are generally discouraged from making. Obviously, it worked out for him in that game as well. But the Patriots, maybe not getting that number 1 pick, certainly a top 5 pick, and they got to be eyeing a quarterback for sure. Mac Jones' experiment is coming to an end. They would be very happy to get either Caleb Williams or Drake May, but it's a domino effect. It really just depends on what the Bears are going to do with that pick. It is still yet to be determined. There's been mixed reviews all year. People are saying, oh, yeah, they're keeping Fields. No, they're taking Caleb Williams. Oh, maybe they want Drake May. I mean, you really just don't know till the offseason. There's so much smoke and mirrors that goes on throughout the NFL season sometimes in the media it's for clicks, sometimes for NFL teams it's strategy. So that'll be a team to watch for a new quarterback, the Patriots. Meanwhile, let's talk about the Steelers a little bit too. So get rid of Canada, blame him for the offensive problems. Their first game, they don't put up a ton of points, but they do put up 400 yards of offense for the first time in many years. So Steelers then lose their quarterback, Kenny Pickett. Mitch Trubisky comes in, has a rough end of the game last week versus the Cardinals, and then this week had to defend the Steelers' home in Heinz Field, and unfortunately wasn't able to get the job done. I will say, though, showed some fight at the end there. If there is one thing about Mitch that I've learned from Mitchell from watching Bears games is that he does have a bit of that comeback dog in him a little bit. It's not always true that he makes that comeback, that he completes the comeback, but he's not going to give you 4 quarters of terrible football. If he's struggling in the first half, he's going to turn it on at some point. And he did show that for the Steelers. Did miss a few throws, but one thing I do want to point out that is really interesting is the center for the Steelers has been given horrible snaps for the last 2 weeks. Lot of really low snaps. Last week when Mitch was first put in and he fumbled pretty early right off the bat, that was a low snap he couldn't handle. We saw a lot of that today. I don't believe that is James Daniels. I think he's playing guard for them. I think that's Kenyon Green or Kendrick Green from Illinois. I guess we can take a look here. Steelers depth chart. But that's such an underrated part of football is getting the snap cleanly. I mean, we saw what happened when you don't hold the ball correctly in the Colts-Titans game when they had their punter get injured, Ryan Tannehill come in to hold, and the extra point was missed. Steelers looking like Mason Cole is their center. I mean, Mason Cole is an atrocious player. No disrespect to him, but he's just not going to get it done. That is not the guy you want snapping the ball to your quarterback or blocking for you in any capacity. And I think that is a main reason of why Mitch had some struggles last night. You can't blame it all on that. You know, he had a bad pick. He had another throw that should have been a pick. He did make some bad throws early in the first half. But again, it's all about resiliency, right? You get teams that do really well in the second half versus the first half. I remember last year the Bears defense was, I think, last in first half defense, and then midway through the season they were first in second half defense. So game's not over until it's over. Patriots got really lucky at the end there. They did play some good defense. But yeah, Mitch Trubisky getting another opportunity to start next week, most likely against the Colts. Wasn't terrible. You can still probably drop a little bit better plays for him. But right now it looks like this Steelers team, if their defense is not going to be able to stop an offense like the Patriots, then who knows how far they're going to get. Currently sitting at 7-6, third in the division, contingent on what happens with the Browns this week. So let's go ahead and talk about some matchups for the week. So 3 big ones right off the bat. You got Bills-Chiefs, 3:25 p.m. on Sunday. That is going to be one of the more highly anticipated games of the year. You know the Bills are 6-6, haven't lived up quite to expectations, but it's not like they've been getting blown out, right? They're always in it. And the rivalry they have with the Chiefs is very, very good. Chiefs coming off of a tough loss against the Packers last week. Again, just self-inflicted wounds. Receiver play is just terrible. Mahomes hasn't quite looked like himself. I really don't think you can blame Mahomes for all of the Chiefs' struggles this year. I mean, the guy's blaming himself, but I don't think it really is on him. And at the end of the day, they still are 8-4. They still are tied for the second record in the AFC. And they beat the Dolphins, right? So if they tie with them, they're ahead of them. Meanwhile, the Ravens will not play the Chiefs this year. Chiefs are also 3-1 in the division, so it doesn't look like any of the other teams will catch them. But maybe the Broncos have a shot if they take down the Chargers or vice versa. We'll talk about that one in a second. But, Bills coming into Arrowhead, also coming off of a bye. Still been trying to figure out their offense a little bit, getting rid of Ken Dorsey. Joe Brady, offensive coordinator, has been really trying to get the running backs involved in the passing game more. I think that's crucial to their success. They really were just relying on wide receiver catches and Josh Allen running the ball. They didn't really give any of the running backs carries. Now James Cook is getting the ball a lot when it's not through the run game, through the pass game as well. The Jets win was a good one. And then the Eagles game was really close. I don't think you can really be too upset about that loss just because, say what you will about the Eagles after losing last week, but that's still the best team in the NFL, at least well, I don't know, actually. I don't know. I take that back. I think the 49ers have established themselves as the best team in the NFL, at least in the NFC, but the Eagles still top 2, top 3. Had some hiccups last game with an injured quarterback. I don't really knock them too much for that. But when it comes to Bills Chiefs, I mean, both of these teams haven't been the dominant force we've seen in the past, and yet the quarterbacks are putting up numbers. The offense is still, for the most part, pretty good. The question for the Chiefs is going to be, one, can Matt Nagy stop being an idiot and hindering his team? And two, can the Chiefs get offensive points in the second half? That has been a huge struggle for them. Some statistic like they hadn't scored a second half offensive touchdown in multiple weeks, like since November. I believe they broke that last week, although I'm not too sure. But either way, that's got to change. I mean, again, game's not over till it's over. They're missing Pacheco this week as well, and a lot of other guys. Brian Cook, cornerback. I think they're missing an offensive tackle. So it's not going to be an easy matchup for them. It is hard to play at Arrowhead, though. And it's not in prime time or anything. It's a 3:30 slot game. And so the question is going to be, Nagy, can they score in the second half? Meanwhile, for the Bills, Josh Allen, limit the turnovers. Chiefs defense is really tough to play against. And while Allen does have a fair amount of scores, he puts up really good numbers every year. The turnover problem, obviously, is a huge issue. So limiting those is going to be crucial to their success. So with that being said, man, this is a tough pick here. I think the Bills really need this win. And the Chiefs missing Pacheco is going to be big for them. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire hasn't really done much. Jerick McKinnon, getting him involved in the pass game will definitely help. But that's just one more weapon less for them. And I think there's no way that the Bills get a losing record after this week. So I might take the Bills coming off a bye. But then again, Mahomes always seems to have the upper leg sometimes. So this is so tough. Man, you know what? I think part of me wants to pick the Bills just because I can't fathom them having a losing record. But really, I do think somehow, some way, the Chiefs will find a way to win this game. The NFL doesn't make sense sometimes, but I could definitely see that happening this week. Man, it's really close. This is gonna be tough. I'm gonna stick with the Chiefs at home here, just Arrowhead. If it was an away game, I think I would pick the Bills. But don't be surprised if that one goes either way. Another big matchup. We've got another couple of AFC West teams. The Broncos and the Chargers facing off in LA. Chargers are 5-7. Broncos are 6-6. Broncos 1-2 for the division. Chargers 1-1. if the Chargers win this game, coming off of a just atrocious win. Is that even a term that you can say? I mean, just an awful win against the Patriots. Somehow Brandon Staley still has a job. They're going to try and knock out the pretty hot Broncos at the moment. Obviously drop one to C.J. Stroud, but another good team. They still were very much in that game. Chargers win this game. They're 6-7, 2-1 in the division. That puts them in second place, right behind the Chiefs. Well, not right behind, but behind the Chiefs. Meanwhile, the Broncos win this game. You're sitting pretty nicely in that second spot in the AFC West at 7-6, and the Chargers would actually drop to bottom of the division, obviously depending on what happens with the Raiders, who play the Vikings this week. But yeah, this is going to be such an interesting game because division rivals always play each other really tough. That's why it's hard to treat a division game just like any other NFL matchup because really anything can happen. I brought this up before on the show, but yeah, it's part of the reason why the Commanders almost beat the Eagles both times this year. It's just division rivals play each other very tough. I'm hoping for that type of energy when the Bears take on the Lions again, see if we can get that dub in Soldier. But I mean, Chargers, you got to unlock the offense. You got to get Austin Eckler going. He's had so many drops this year in the receiving game, which that's really where he gets his money. He's never really been a pure rushing back, although he does look a lot slower this year than he has in years past. That quickness and that burst just doesn't seem to be there nearly as much as in years past. And for the Broncos, the defense. I mean, yeah, the Chargers offense hasn't been great, but still they can get hot. And if they do get hot, that is one of the more deadlier offenses in the NFL. The big if, though. And so the Broncos, you can pretty much count on the offense to get points on the board. They've been pretty consistent in that 17 to 24 range in the last half of the season or so. But defense just clamping the Chargers offense is going to be key. Run defense is going to be key. Pressuring Herbert is going to be key. And also protecting Russell Wilson. You got Khalil Mack, who we talked about last week on the show, now does have a tied for career high in sacks as he continues his Defensive Player of the Year. He's got 15 sacks in the season, not even playing us opposite Joey Bosa anymore, just having a phenomenal season. And Broncos offensive line definitely is questionable at times, so the key is going to be shutting him down as well. So for this game here, I think the Chargers definitely want to win this one. The Broncos would like to get back on track of their playoff push that was happening. They are the away team. I don't really count it as much of an away team just because it's L.A. But I think I am going to take the Broncos here away. I think just overall they are better coached, and that is what is going to help them win this game. Russell Wilson was so good at so good at not turning the ball over this year until last game where he had 2 picks and a fumble. And so that's going to be key is ball security. But assuming that he can bounce back and he doesn't start this turnover issue that he's been avoiding thus far, I think that they'll be able to pull this one out. And the Chargers, man, I mean, things are looking rough. I will say this. I am fairly confident that if the Chargers lose this game, Brandon Staley will be fired. If the Spanos, the Chargers owners, have any common sense, which they have probably very little of if you know the Spanoses, but they got to get rid of Staley if they lose this game. And if they win, live to fight another day, Brandon. Live to fight another day. Next matchup here, there's a couple other good ones. I was thinking about the Seahawks 49ers. You could even talk about Bengals Colts. Bears-Lions rematch is going to be good. But the big one I want to talk about is the Sunday night game, Cowboys at home versus the Eagles. Eagles come off of a pretty tough loss against the 49ers. The Cowboys earlier in the year lost to the 49ers, just got obliterated. So really this is the who is the second best team behind the 49ers Bowl in the NFC. Maybe you can argue the Lions are up there as well. But Cowboys, Dak Prescott, red hot as MVP candidate. Probably should be his year. I think that if the MVP goes to any quarterback, or no, if the MVP goes to McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, that's probably what should happen. I would say if Tyreek Hill gets 2,000 receiving yards, he should be the MVP. McCaffrey, if he stays healthy all year, he's going to keep putting up numbers. He should be the MVP. This should be a non-quarterback year unless you decide to go with Dak because, man, for all the hate he has gotten over the last couple years, maybe he's not, like a Super Bowl winner yet. But you can't blame Dak Prescott for why the Cowboys haven't gotten to the Super Bowl in recent years. He's been inconsistent, yes, but overall, that is still a franchise guy. And right now, he's having the best season of his career. And so I'm happy for him. Looking to get a big win in Philly. I think if he does win this game, not in Philly, but at Philly, that didn't make any sense. Not in Philly or at Philly, but against Philly. If he gets this win, you got to be talking about him more as the MVP, especially because the next guy on the quarterbacks list is Jalen Hurts. And the Cowboys narrowly lost to them earlier this year. The crazy thing is that if they do win this game, they will actually be number one in the division. They'll be 4-1 for a division record. Eagles will be 3-1. And since if the Cowboys do win, they would be split because Eagles won one time, Cowboys won one time. So then it really just depends on how the rest of the division shapes out. Meanwhile, if the Eagles win, get them 2 wins ahead of the Cowboys, and they're undefeated in their division. So this is going to be tough. It always is. I think the Cowboys are so hot right now, and the Eagles really need a bounce-back win, but that's going to be so tough against the Cowboys' defense, and especially that offense, which is red hot. Eagles' defense hasn't been the same in recent years or in recent weeks as it was last year. And for that reason, I think that the Cowboys have a real shot of winning this one. Don't count out Jalen Hurts. That guy's a winner. Took care of business in Buffalo, even when they got screwed a little bit. And he's still very much an MVP candidate. Not to discredit him at all. I don't think the numbers he's put up have been MVP, but when you talk about the most valuable player, if Jalen Hurts is not at the helm of the Eagles, I don't believe they have a winning record. So this is going to be a great game to watch. Key for the Eagles is just going to be limiting turnovers, establishing the run game against this really tough Cowboys D. And if they can open up the run game, passing game will follow. I think the emphasis should be on quarterback reads, get Jalen Hurts outside of the pocket, get him on the move, let him run a little bit more. And then meanwhile, for the Cowboys, you're going to try and do the opposite of letting them do that. You want to neutralize Jalen Hurts because that offense runs through him. Your secondary has been phenomenal. Your run D has been phenomenal. Get pressure on him. The Eagles line is one of the best in the NFL, if not the best. You got to get pressure on him. So that's going to be crucial for their win. And can Dak stay hot? Take some pressure off him, get the running game going with Tony Pollard, who is on my fantasy team, and I'd very much appreciate some points because I think he's been criminally underutilized this year and also just not super efficient. But get the running game going as well. This is going to be a shootout. If it's not, I will be shocked. And I think I am going to take the Cowboys here at home, red hot. Philadelphia probably only going to lose by 3 if I had to guess. I'm just hoping for a good game, though, and this is going to be one to mark your calendars with. So we are going to try and take that break one more time, and we'll be back here in just a second. All right. So we talked about our matchups this week. Let's talk about the player flashback for today. This is one of the more overlooked guys in recent history, and a personal favorite of mine. I didn't get to watch a ton of his games growing up as a kid, but the tail end that I did see, this guy was so fun to watch, and looking at his highlights as well. You don't see defensive players with a type of highlight reel like this guy. He's a safety for the Cardinals, played from 2001 to 2012. He's now currently a Panthers executive. This guy I'm talking about, Adrian Wilson. If you don't know who Adrian Wilson is, look him up. He is a baller. Something that I think characterizes him nicely is this guy was Cam Chancellor before Cam Chancellor was in the NFL. Ball hawk safety with a heat-seeking missile. He's got some crazy hard hits. Actually has an NFL record for the second most sacks in a season by a DB with 8 in 2005. Yes, he's a safety, strong safety, and he had 8 sacks in 2005. So Adrian Wilson, third-round pick from the Cardinals in 2001. The guy spent his entire career in Arizona, where he was a 5-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro, and he had some really underrated seasons with the Cardinals. Wasn't a starter in his first year, but after that, had 4 picks in his second year. He was a big tackle guy. He's got 903 career tackles in 11 years of play. And he was a sack monster as well for a DB spot. He had that 8-sack season in 2005, followed it up with 5 in 2006, which is a fair amount for a safety. I would argue that his best season is either 2006 or 2009. 2005, he was actually 4th in Defensive Player of the Year award. He had a pick, 8 sacks, 109 tackles, 13 tackles for loss as well. It was pretty impressive. But 2006 was his first Pro Bowl. He had 4 interceptions, one of them being a 99-yard pick 6 off Michael Vick, which is tied for the longest interception return in NFL history. Another 5 sacks, 84 tackles, 12 TFLs, and this was the first year they started keeping track of quarterback hits, had 8 quarterback hits as well. He was a second-team All-Pro and a Pro Bowler, and that was kind of his breakout season. A couple years later, 2009, he earned his first and only first-team All-Pro. He was a second-team All-Pro the year before, but 2009 had 5 interceptions, had a forced fumble, 75 tackles, 11 TFLs, 8 QB hits. Again, guy was a beast. 13 pass deflections as well. I didn't mention that in all the other ones. The previous seasons where he was All-Pro and Pro Bowl, he had 9 pass deflections, 10 pass deflections, 13 in this season. And even at age 32 in 2011, had a pick, 14 pass deflections, a forced fumble, 65 tackles. So this guy was a stud. Go look up his highlight reels. He's got some great YouTube clips. And right now, he's still very involved in the NFL. He is a current executive for the Panthers. He started as a regional scout for the Cardinals in 2015 after he retired. Actually was on the Patriots practice squad and then the Bears practice squad until 2014. But after he retired, I was with the Cardinals as a scout from 2015, 2018. Then he was the director of scouting 2019 and 2020, VP of pro scouting for the Cardinals in 21, 22. And this year, he is the Carolina Panthers vice president of player personnel. Just a great guy all around, great locker room guy, great football mind. I mean, leader of the defense, had a super underrated career, really fun to watch. Seriously, I mean, heat-seeking missile and a ball hawk. This guy is who Jamal Adams thinks he is with all the sacks. And, man, it was awesome to see him when I was growing up watching football. For those last couple years, and looking at the earlier years of his career through YouTube was a treat as well. So Adrian Wilson, if you didn't know the name, now you do. Guy is a monster, and shout out him. So we're going to go into some of your guys' questions. We have first up from Braylon. Where did it go wrong for Belichick for so many people calling for him to retire? Well, Braylon, that is a good question. I think the easy answer is it starts with Tom Brady. Belichick had Tom Brady for so long. Tom Brady really kind of solves all their problems because he is that guy. And once he left, had some success with Mac Jones initially. But personally, without psychoanalyzing the man, I think Belichick really is just in a funk right now. He just doesn't seem to have his usual mojo. The defense is still playing up to par. You can't really blame him for the offense. He's not calling the plays on offense, and they've only hired terrible offensive coordinators since Brady left, right? They had a defensive coordinator in Matt Patricia calling the offensive plays after being fired for being terrible at his head coaching job with the Lions. They had Bill O'Brien, just not a good offensive play caller, has had some success in the past, but my opinion, just really not that guy. A lot of just cycling coordinators and quarterbacks and offensive talent. I think the other thing is that, because again, you got to take into account that the defense still is playing really well. They only allowed over 31 points one time this year. The Saints put up 34 on them. That was the highest score that they lost to, and that was a fluke game because Saints don't play like that all the time. And they did have a pick six in that game, so only allowed 27 there. And then the Dolphins, they put up 31 against them. That's one of the best teams in the NFL, one of the best offenses in the NFL. So really the defense, besides those two games, obviously held the Chargers to 6. Take a look at some of the other games from them this year. The Eagles held to 25. First time they played Dolphins held to 24. Jets to 10. Cowboys, I take it back. The Cowboys was rough. That was the 38-3 loss. That was their biggest one. But, like all things considered, right, Patriots defense for a pretty brittle roster. They have played very well as a defensive unit, especially in the last couple of weeks. Colts, Giants, Chargers, now the Steelers held to under 20. And operating under the assumption that Belichick is not really involved in the offense, you can blame that on the coaches or just not having a wide receiver. They don't have any offensive talent besides Ramondre Stevenson, really. Juju Smith-Schuster, kind of not what he once was. Hunter Henry and Devontae Parker will show up for a couple plays here and there. Kendrick Bourne was having a nice year, but they lost him to a torn ACL. There's so many other factors besides Belichick there, but I think personally he's in a slump. I don't know if he should retire. I don't know if he should get fired, but I could totally see him and the Patriots mutually parting ways this offseason, him taking a year off and coming back to coach another team. Or maybe even maybe retiring for a year, coming out of retirement to be a defensive coordinator or even a special teams coordinator. The guy is one of the best coaches of all time, with or without Tom Brady. Tom Brady still also had legendary defenses, which contributed to his success as well. So when you talk about the debate as to, who was the reason for the Patriots' success, Belichick or Brady, it's got to be a little bit of both. Now, right now, it's looking like it was a lot of Brady, but I think Belichick still has some years in him. Daniel is asking if the Bears should hire Belichick. I'm going to say no on that one, which is crazy to say, right? Because if you asked me that 5 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, I don't want Matt Nagy. Are you kidding me? But no, I think that Bill, maybe he just needs a fresh start, but probably needs a year off of coaching, get his bearings a little bit. And also just the culture that the Bears and the city of Chicago has, I don't think that's a fit for the mopey Bill Belichick. That's just kind of not his style. I don't think the type of energy that Chicago has, and whether or not the coaches have had success in the past, still the culture and the locker room of the players, it doesn't really fit in Chicago. And okay, we'll say that maybe we do want the Patriot way coaching style to kind of whip our roster into shape. But no, I would not say that is a necessity right now, especially considering the Patriots are not very good right now. So blame Belichick's failure on external things if you like. I think bro is just in a slump right now. Still got some time to figure that out. Caden asks, what players are your favorite to watch purely based on vibes? Man, this is a great question. Purely based on vibes. Well, I can tell you one of the first guys that comes to mind is Isaiah Pacheco, because the way that man runs the ball is so funny. And he has some of the most juice I've ever seen from any running back. It seems like he can get destroyed off a hit stick tackle and just bounce right up and flex and jump around. I mean, you would think that guy is on drugs. Truly. You would think that man is on stimulants because he will just pop up from the ground after getting tackled like it's nobody's business. He is so fun to watch just run. And as much of a meme as it is, I mean, that is electric. The other player I would love to watch based off of vibes, actually kind of a wild card here, but Christian Wilkins, defensive tackle for the Dolphins. Pretty charismatic guy. He actually picked up Roger Goodell, gave him a big hug on the stage when he was getting drafted, so that speaks a lot to his character. He plays with some ferociousness on that D tackle. He's a big guy, but he's pretty mobile, gets to the quarterback as well. And I just love his celebrations. I love his energy. He's a goofy dude. I'd say the same about Quinnen Williams, actually, pretty comparable for the Jets defensive tackle. So I love watching those two guys watch. And that's an unconventional answer, I know. But if you want a more conventional answer, honestly, Gardner Minshew is so fun to watch. I love watching Gardner Minshew play. Even if he's not the best quarterback in the NFL, Minshew Mania for the Jags was awesome. He was fired up in the Colts locker room this week, and that is such a great video to see. I would highly recommend looking that up. I love watching Minshew play, and Fields. I love Justin Fields. The way he goes about his just celebrations and leadership, just everything about it. I mean, he's got swagger, but he's humble, and his style of play is one of the most exciting play of any Bears player I've ever seen, probably since Devin Hester. So I love watching Justin Fields play. Another guy, Saquon Barkley, just awesome to watch. Speaking of other Giants, I used to love Odell Beckham. He's kind of become a little annoying in today's day, but still plays with just a very iconic swagger. Another reason why I loved Cam Newton back in the day. That was one of my favorite players growing up. So that's a great question, just purely based off vibes, who you like. And Caden, I'm curious to hear your answers for this question. Next question here is from Eddie. What are the top 10 tight ends next year, or at the start of next year? And he mentions to maybe include Brock Bowers. Notre Dame tight end looks to be a generational talent. We could be seeing some Kyle Pitts-esque draft stock for him. Well, I know he's fallen off a little bit, but you got to put Kelsey at number one. I understand that there are tight ends that may be having a better season in terms of like advanced stats and whatnot. But at the end of the day, Travis Kelsey is still leading the league in receiving yards despite missing a game. He is second in the NFL in receptions and second in the NFL in targets. You talk about touchdowns, he's number 2 as well. I mean, he doesn't look as explosive as before, and obviously you've heard a lot of highlights. You've heard more things about Taylor Swift and him this year than probably highlights. But no, I mean, this guy's going to get 1,000 yards again. He might be the greatest Hall of Famer of all time, honestly. It's really in contention with Gronk and Tony Gonzalez. So he's got to be number one. It's not quite time for him to give up the throne yet. But I will say, as much as I love George Kittle, I think that T.J. Hockenson I would put at number 2. T.J. Hockenson, another Iowa legend, has just been one of the best players in the entire NFL over the last couple of years because he does everything so well. He is sure-handed as all heck. And right now, second in the NFL in receiving yards. By the way, when I'm talking about receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, I'm talking about with specifically tight ends, just not to be confusing there. So he is leading the NFL in tight end targets by far. He's the only person with over 93, and he's got 108. Hence, he's leading in receptions as well with 80. He has got, 5 touchdowns in the season. So similar to Kelsey. He's right there with Kelsey currently. But yeah, he's been the security blanket for whether it's Cousins, Dobbs, Jaron Hall, whoever. In Detroit as well, he was amazing. He's probably going to get 1,000 yards this year. And I just love watching him play. I wish he was not on the Vikings. I really wish. But I would say he'd be my number 2. Speaking of Iowa tight ends, obviously you got George Kittle, still a monster. He's averaging 14 yards a catch right now. It's like a receiver. He's got 50 catches, 735 yards, 5 touchdowns. Still got it. Still one of the best blockers in the NFL at any position, really. And you can honestly say the same about Hockenson. He's been a great blocker too. But, George Kittle, great tight end. Still got that as well. Speaking of more Iowa tight ends, man, I love Mark Andrews. But the way Sam Laporta is playing right now, I got to put Sam Laporta at number 4. I mean, Sam Laporta, call me biased, but yeah, the guy's a stud. 64 catches, 680 yards right now. He's got 6 touchdowns. He has been an insane asset for the Lions offense. Second-round pick. Really funny guy to see get interviewed as well. Real Iowa boy right there. After that, I got to put Mark Andrews. No disrespect to him. He is one of the best tight ends in the NFL. He's just been hurt this year. Had 6 touchdowns, which was easily in the lead before getting hurt. And he is still a better red zone threat and wide receiving threat than a lot of wide receivers that play in the NFL. Lamar Jackson, his buddy, even called him kind of wide receiver one sometimes. So I wish him a healthy recovery next year. He's still going to be in that top 5. Beyond that, I mean, there's a lot of things that we could do here. Dallas Goedert, I'm a huge fan of. I think he's super underrated. Darren Waller is so injured, but whenever he is playing, he's fantastic. And then Trey McBride looks like a really good guy as well. If I had to rank these guys all in order, we'll give the vets the benefit of the doubt here. So we'll say Darren Waller will be back. I'm going to put Dallas Goedert up there. Then I'm going to go ahead and say I'm between a couple guys right here. I think I'm going to go ahead and say Trey McBride. He looks like he has a great connection with Kyler Murray in Arizona, kind of the successor to Zach Ertz. He's been putting up some great numbers recently. So I'll probably put him at, what is that? I believe 7. Let's see. We got Kelsey, Hawkinson, Kittle, Laporta, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller. Yeah, we'll go ahead and put Trey McBride at 7. 8, I'm going to put Dalton Kincaid. He's been putting up some great numbers as well. I think if it wasn't such a stacked offense with Diggs and Gabe Davis, that would have been, I mean, he would get even more targets, and sharing with Dawson Knox as well. 9, we'll say Cole Kmet for Chicago. His name isn't called a ton, but when it is, he's always catching the ball. I mean, he's been fantastic. And then 10, I'm going to take a shot in the dark. We'll say Michael Mayer for the Raiders. He was drafted as second rounder this year. I loved him coming out of college. I think he's easily the best tight end in that draft class. I mean, well, Sam Laporta is making a very, very good case. So maybe Sam Laporta is the best. But coming out, I thought Michael Mayer was in the top 2 tight ends and hasn't really gotten a shot on the Raiders. A terrible run offense. So I think he'll have a good year next year, hopefully. And some other honorable mentions, Evan Engram's putting up pretty good, solid numbers. Dalton Schultz with Houston, and a bunch of other guys. Packers got some good stuff going down there. Another question here. This one is going to be from Casey. Who do you see having the better career? Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, and Jahmyr Gibbs? Well, Jahmyr Gibbs looks so explosive right now. I love Kenneth Walker. But has had a few problems with inefficiency this year. Blame it on the offensive line as well. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, honestly, could be the best. He is so fast and so strong and a great receiving threat. And behind that Lions O-line, man, he is destined for greatness. So I say Jahmyr Gibbs probably has the best career. I love Breece Hall as well. I think he might have the next best, but I could also see Kenneth Walker being a 1,600-yard guy. So yeah, we'll go Gibbs, Breece Hall, Kenneth. You could maybe change Kenneth and Breece. And I believe that is going to do it for the questions today. If I missed a question, I'll go ahead and answer it on the Instagram today. If you did like what you hear, go ahead and check out that Instagram page at Onside Kick Show. This episode will also be published to YouTube as well, our YouTube channel. You'll find a link to that through the Instagram as well. But thank you guys so much for listening, and thank you guys so much for a great year so far, a great 2023. I'll talk to you guys before the year ends for sure. It just won't be from the KRUI studio, so you can find those episodes on YouTube. But thank you guys again so much for listening.